So I think lavender is one of those perennials that everybody loves for various reasons, and we all have a little bit of a difficulty with. So we're going to start off with kind of where the name comes from, because it's going to help us a little bit. Um, just knowing that lavender does have a very strong history, and one of the reasons is because it does have that antimicrobial property. So it is considered a short-lived perennial. So English lavender has the longest lifespan, and that can still be between 5 and 15 years. Um, it is in the mint family. So Kentucky is known to only really grow two types of lavender, but there are 47 different species around the world. It is important to know where it grows originally, where it came from. And you can see that, the Canary Islands, most of Europe, Northern and Eastern Africa, part of the Mediterranean. And the reason it's so important to know where it originated is because you can recreate those original growing conditions. So it does prefer a very dry, neutral to alkaline soil, that same soil that's in the Mediterranean. So on this map, you can kind of see where I tried to circle in red were some of those countries that um, lavender, excuse me, not lavender grows naturally. And you can see it is that very dry Mediterranean area. So in recreating it here in the States, those are things to consider. When you identify it, it is arranged. Those blooms are in a whorl. They come in, you can see on that picture how they grow around the stem. They also come in a variety of colors. You've got not only just that lavender, but you've got some blues, some violets, even some really, really dark purple to even yellow, which is sometimes unusual. The leaf is going to be a simple pinnate, kind of a toothed leaf. Like I said, some areas it can be an annual forest, a short-lived perennial. They do get woody, so sometimes you can actually see that as more of a woody shrub. And luckily enough, our bees and butterflies love them, but deers don't. Being in that mint family, it has too strong of a fragrance that most deer will kind of stay away from. So when choosing that lavender cultivar, it's the first thing that we need to do is just kind of decide how you want to use that. What is your end purpose? Is it just to look pretty in your garden? Is it to attract beneficials? Do you want to use it for cut flowers or dried flowers? Or maybe even culinary, which a lot of people don't realize that lavender can be used in a culinary way, not just ornamental. So the variety that grows best typically in Kentucky is either going to be a hybrid or our English lavender. And most common are that Hidcote or Munstead variety. That's the one that most people are familiar with. Um, these two varieties are best suited for dried flowers because those flowers will persist on the stem. They hang on a lot longer when you dry them. Um, in order to dry them, you really do want to harvest when the bottom blooms kind of open and then the rest are pretty tight. You cut the whole stalk down to like the first or even the second pair of leaves. That gives you a nice long stem that you can dry. Don't harvest that first year because you really want to kind of snip off all the buds so that that energy goes down to the roots to get those roots established before you really let it bloom and grow for your flowers. And you can see there that most of your English lavenders are going to grow in a zones 5 to 8. And of course, we're 6A here, but part of the state is now in a 7. So we're right in the middle of that grow zone. So we should be pretty well adapted as far as that goes. Now, this new hybrid that have become very popular, um, it's uh, it's a hybrid between two different types of lavender. It gets that large leaf from the English lavender. Sometimes they are going to bloom, 3 to 4 weeks later, because they do have that larger, shrub form. The nice thing is it does have a higher essential oil concentrate. in those flowers. So it does have a lot of stronger characteristics, a lot of that extra oil that the straight species don't have, which makes it really good for drying and for potpourri. Two of the newer varieties that are very, very easy to find seem to be phenomenal. It is very resistant to humidity, so it makes it really good for drying. It's great in our area. This is the phenomenal is the variety that I have gone to growing myself. I find it's much better than either the Hidcote or the Munstead for me. Another one that is available is Grosso, and that is also highly disease resistant, which makes it a great hybrid form for us. Now, some of the annual lavenders that we can grow, a lot of people will find at the garden centers. You've got your Spanish lavender, and you can see that in the picture. It has those bracts that stick up like rabbit ears, and that's a real easy way to identify both French and Spanish. That Spanish does have a very strong fragrance, and you can see the growing zones for both of those are those zones 8 to 10. So it's a fun annual that you can grow. You can dry those, but they're not going to be one that is going to persist, over winter for us. Sometimes you can find that the Portuguese lavender. It is also somewhat of a cross. It's used in that cross that we have because it does grow in that 6 to 9. So those are some of the other ones. So when we're looking at growing lavender, it's really, really important to know what your soil pH is to start with. So of course, with extension, we're going to recommend getting your soil tested first. And when you get your soil tested, you want to make sure that you are in that alkaline pH. So a 6.7 to a 7.3. Definitely don't go into that acidic soils down to the 6.5 because that will not be in that native condition where lavenders grow. That English lavender does like a chalkier soil. There are a few varieties that maybe can go into that more acidic, but really you want to stay in that 6.7. When you find that place that you want to grow, make sure that it is very well drained. If you don't have an overhang of a building, like Amy was talking about, you want to make sure that it's a very loose soil, maybe some sand or some gravel on the underneath part on the bottom, because lavender does not, and I cannot express enough, lavender hates to have wet feet. So if you have a rich organic soil, that is not going to be the place for lavender. You don't want to use a lot of mulches, just our natural hardwood mulches, because that does hold in that moisture. So it's great for a lot of our other plants, but not for our lavenders. With lavender, you would want to mulch probably with like a pea gravel. It does prefer like that warm, well-joined soil. So if you have a slope that's south to southwest facing, that's probably going to be best. Lavender, once it gets established, is drought resistant because it does like to have that, drier soil. So that does help, us in, July and August. You do want to put it in a very sunny position, full sun. And you want to make sure that it gets morning sunlight because it does need to have all of that morning dew burned off. You want to make sure that it does stay on that dry side. You want to space it, probably that 12 to 18 so that you get good movement, air movement around the plants. And it's really not good to fertilize because, like they have that dry, chalky soil, they're not going to need a lot of extra fertilizers, but they don't compete with weeds very well. So you really want to make sure that you keep it in an area that they're not going to compete with other weeds. So whether you need to use a landscape fabric or a weed barrier, even that gravel will help to reduce weeds. So that's very important. They don't really have a lot of pest or disease problems as long as you can make sure that it's dry. Don't overwater. Make sure it has those dry roots. Unfortunately, grasshoppers are probably one of the worst pests that we can that occur with our lavender. So once you get it established, make sure that you can kind of keep those grasshoppers away. And also note that there is no commercial pesticide that is labeled for lavender usage. So unfortunately, you can't spray for your grasshoppers or any of the other pests because there is no commercial pesticide label for that. And like we said earlier, lavender does start declining in 10 years or less. So this is not going to be a plant that you're going to have in the garden for generations. This is going to be, a short-lived. You're going to love it, and you're going to love it a lot when you have it, and then it's going to start to decline. And we're going to go into some other ways, some propagation that you can extend that lifespan of lavender just a little bit. But again, you want to make sure that the location. You got to put the right plant in the right place. Lavender will, once it's established, survive down to temperatures of -20, but you have to make sure that it doesn't stay wet and cold. Okay, so with our propagation, and this is, like I said, a great way to continue that lifespan. When you start seeing those plants maybe start taking a downturn, go ahead. It says take a 4-inch cutting. I'm not going to get a ruler out and make sure that it's not maybe closer to 6-inch or closer to 3-inch. 4 is an average. It's a good length to start with. You're going to remove half of those bottom leaves when you stick it in a very well-draining soil, perlite, and if you mix up, half perlite, half peat moss. If you're not going to use peat moss, use that core fiber to mix that in so that you really get a good draining. And bottom heat. Bottom heat is really, really going to help. You almost don't even have to use any of your rooting hormones if you can get a good bottom heat with a good soil that is going to well drain for them. With that bottom heat in a grow light, you're going to have roots within about 14 days. Now, if you don't have bottom heat, it can take up to 4 weeks. So that's a really big difference when you talk 14 days to 4 weeks. So really, making sure that you have good draining soil, bottom heat, and then grow it, you can really get roots fast. Now, once you get a good root establishment, fertilize at about 1/4 of the rate with liquid fertilizer. And then in about 3 weeks, you're not going to really need fertilizer after that. You're going to transplant those outside, and Mother Nature is just going to take care of them for you. So then once we get them established, we're going to talk about pruning. So it's really important to keep that plant in a nice, good, healthy, shape. You do not want to cut when you're pruning down into the hardwood. You're only going to prune off those flower spikes that are still green and flexible. You do not want to cut anything more than 1/3 of the plant at any time. And don't cut out any of that winter dieback until you start seeing new growth. Because lavender plants themselves, they're going to have some of that dead leaf on the bottom of those stems. It can sometimes be difficult to see where they're going to bud and start to grow. So you don't want to cut down into those woody stems too early. So make sure that you wait before you start cutting off any, winter dieback until you start seeing those buds open. And then when you prune, only prune the green stems. Don't get down into that woody area. So when we start harvesting, like I said earlier, you're going to harvest when you start seeing some of the blooms open at the bottom of those stems. Again, that first year, we don't want to cut, or we don't want to allow it to bloom or harvest. We want to cut those buds off because we want all of that plant energy to go get those roots established. You're going to have a much better success rate if we get a good root establishment before we start harvesting. We want to harvest in the morning, but after that dew has evaporated. And really the reason for harvesting in the morning is because we want that strongest oil. We don't want it to dissipate or to lose any of that oil in the plant. If we harvest in the morning when that oil is the strongest, then we're going to have the strongest flavor or odors, and that's what we really, really want. When you harvest your lavender and you cut those flower spikes, you really want to tie them in bunches. I like using rubber bands myself because as that bunch, when it dries and it gets smaller and smaller, that rubber band will constrict and stay. You don't lose all of the stems as they dry. Sometimes they'll say to hang them in an attic because it's out of direct light. It usually stays a little bit dark, but you want to make sure that if you do it in an attic, somewhere where you're going to have some good air movement. You want that air to go through and just naturally dry. You don't want those stalks to just hang stale. So having it in a cool, dark, well ventilated area out of direct sunlight is gonna it's gonna help that storage that plant to dry better. So if we look at English lavender, and I thought this was a really interesting comparison. So English lavender, if you have 1 acre planted, you're going to get 300 to 1,800 pounds of dried flowers or 2 gallons of essential oil. So you think 1 acre is only can produce 2 gallons of essential oil. Now with that French lavender, you can see what a jump that is in the flower production that you're going to get from dried flower. And then between a 4.2 and a 5.4 gallons of essential oil. So even though English lavender is a little bit more reliable for us, if you're growing for essential oil production or dried flowers, that French lavender varieties are going to actually work a little bit better on a commercial level. Okay, so that's really what we all want is that beautiful purple and that essential oil. So in order to get essential oils, and you could actually produce your own essential oil at home. But you can see that those varieties can be affected by the cultivars that you use, the soil and the way it grows, how they're harvested, and then how quickly you take those flowers that are harvested and you actually get them into distillation. So really a homeowner can do either a steam distillation or what's better is even a water. But you can kind of see, those percentages you know, that you're going to get. So there's 4 typical methods of distillation, and that said, the steam distillation and the water distillation. But those are going to be the 2 types of distillation for a homeowner. Once you get into that solvent extractant and the supercritical extraction, when you're using that carbon dioxide, those are definitely going to be more on that level of commercial distillation. But you can, as a homeowner, use either of those 2 types if you wanted to produce your own oils. But you can see from those past percentages, you're really going to have to use a lot of lavender plants to get a significant amount. Okay, so we did talk about drying a little bit already. Harvesting in the morning, cutting your stalks after those first 2 flowers on the spikes have opened, tie them in bunches. You really don't want to get more than 1 inch in diameter and using that rubber band so that they, as the stalks dry out, those rubber bands will shrink and still hold them. Hanging them upside down in a well-ventilated area out of direct light because that light will lighten the color, and that's what we really want is that big, vibrant color. So it can take 2 to 6 weeks depending on your condition. And if you don't let that lavender completely dry, it will mold. So it's very, very important to let it dry. Not just 2 weeks. Some areas are going to need 6 and could be even more, depending on like the humidity in the area. So again, culinary. People don't think about lavender, but lavender flowers are edible. You can put them in salads, soups, and stews. My very favorite is lavender cookies. I love a lavender shortbread cookie. And I also like lavender in lemonade, but you can put them in teas too. So there's a lot of uses that people don't think about lavender. And there's just some pictures to kind of show you. You can even put it on chicken on the grill, lavender sugar. And like I said, stalks in lavender. I like to have the flowers in the lavender in the lemonade. Okay, so I loved this picture because obviously I don't think this is Kentucky, but I wanted to show you some of the large scale production and the equipment that's used on large scale. So it kind of looks like a combine, and they actually, there we go, even harvest it like a combine. So you can see on the left of the screen that row of plants and how they just go through and they just take all of those stems off. Now, in the picture, you can also see they don't go all the way down to that woody area of the plant. You can still see that green foliage on the bottom there, on the top of those plants there. So they really are careful not to get down into that woody area. So that is basically my presentation. So if anybody has any questions, anything that I can help with, please let me know.